welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and this is the Astral Library. Pardon if you can hear a bit of scratchiness in my throat. These Santa Anas have rolled into here in Southern California and the dryness and all the dirt has like totally screwed with my throat and just like the change in weather, and I'm over it. Fall, colder weather, okay? I'm over the heat. I'm over the flip-flopping. It just needs to be fall because you know what? It's November now. We need to have cooler weather. But also, since it's November, it means October is over and it is time for my reading wrap up. I actually had a pretty good reading month in October. I ended up reading, I believe, 10 books, which is insane. I read like maybe 3 books in September. So to go from like one of my worst reading months to one of my best reading months is kind of hilarious. What I read in October is kind of funny. So let me give you some statistics. Let me grab my laptop right here really quick. As I said, I read a total of 10 books in October, of which those 10 books divided into 4 genres. I had fantasy, literary classic, mystery, and contemporary. And then of those books, I had 6 3-star ratings, 2 4-star ratings, and 2 5-star ratings, which averages out about a 3.6 star rating for the reading month, which is not awful. In kind of clarification of my rating system, 5 stars is like, I absolutely love the book. It was perfect for me. I had so much fun reading it. I didn't want to put it down and I was just really captivated into it. 4 stars is I still really enjoyed the book and I could see myself considering it a contender to be my favorite, but there was something about it that held me back. Either I got bored at a certain point or I had like some major issue with it. That made me not want to give it that full perfection grade. 3 stars is I just enjoyed it. It was just okay. There was nothing amazing about it, but nothing bad about it either. My 2 stars is I found myself disliking it more than I liked it. It had some major issues in it. It had a character I really didn't like, or it tackled a topic I thought was silly or just handled wrong. And then my 1 star is I absolutely hated the book. If I could give it 0 stars, I would give it 0 stars. My 1-star ratings are I never want to pick up this book again. I never want to think about it. That's the end of it. So having a 3.6 for my month's average is decently a good reading month. It means I enjoyed a lot of what I read, but I didn't have anything amazing. And then the total number of pages I read in October was 2,672. So a good chunk of books. I believe I read a lot of shorter books this month. So I think I only had one 500-page book, I believe. So I did really good. Like October was just a great reading month, even though I read 1 spooky book. For spooky month, I read 1 spooky book. In fact, my November TBR should be up prior to this video, so you will see that I have more spooky books planned for November than I did October. Well, what you gonna do? All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the books that I read for this month. We're gonna start off with my giant chunk of what I read for this, and that is the Mercy Thompson series by Patricia Briggs. So of this series, I read Bloodbound, Iron Kiss, Bone Crossed, and Silverborn. So if you don't know, the Mercy Thompson series is a paranormal romance series that is 14 books long, which is kind of crazy because this series has been being published since like the early 2000s. So the fact that it's still ongoing is quite crazy. But in that series, we are following Mercy Thompson, who is a skinwalker, or someone who can shapeshift into a coyote whenever she pleases. Now, Mercy is a really interesting character because she is technically outside of the supernatural community. There's not a lot of skinwalkers around the area, and she's kind of the only one. And because of that, she is just this general outsider, but Mercy grew up with werewolves, so she has a deep connection to the werewolf community. But besides her connection to werewolves, Mercy Thompson also works as a mechanic, which has put her in the kind of vicinity of other supernatural communities because her mentor, Z, was a fae, and she fixes Stefan, who is a vampire's car. So she has kind of her fingers and toes in every community, which has inevitably led her into so much trouble. So in the first book, we're following Mercy as she's kind of getting involved in the werewolf community. But in book 2, we are focusing on vampires, and then book 3 is the fae. And we kind of start moving between these communities as Mercy finds herself deeper and deeper in either the debt of these other communities or because of her own actions. Because let's face it, Mercy Thompson is a trouble magnet. Now, I don't want to go too much in depth of these books in particular because I talked about the majority of them in my reading for 100 pages a day. But I want to say that this series is a series I've read before and I love coming back to it because it is a series that gets me out of a reading slump no matter how thick or strong that slump is. Mercy Thompson always grabs my attention, and it was so much fun to be able to dive back into that world and just kind of rediscover my love for reading, because it was kind of ruined in September. I just didn't want to pick up anything, and instead of reaching for things I wanted to read and that I felt like would be just fun, I waited till the end of the month to pick it up. And I could see myself of getting a lot further in the Mercy Thompson series than 6 books, which was just a mistake because I had so much fun reading these books in October, and it was just really nice to return to this world and to get to see the vampires, which are my favorite part of this series. I don't know what it is about how Patricia Briggs portrays and writes her vampires, because they're nothing special per se. They are very much under like the typical lore and just like idea of what a vampire is. But her characters are just so fascinating because she takes the typical lore and just does it so well. Like, there's a reason we all love vampires, and we can watch the same like vampire tropes over and over again. I'm no exception. Vampires are my favorite characters, but Patricia Briggs just writes them so great because they're not only really vicious and dark, they just have very complex relationships, both with Mercy as well as with each other. And getting to read the vampires in this series has been a lot of fun, which is why I believe one of my 5-star reads for this month was Bloodbound, because it was the first book that we were focusing on the vampires and really getting to meet them, and it was just a lot of fun. It was a page turner. It had my attention from the very first moment, and it was just a lot of fun. And I'm so happy I started reading the series again, because it was a great time, and I am so happy that I still have this series, and I actually now own almost the entire series in hardback, which is great because these paperbacks suck. Like, these are the only things you can usually find of the first 3 books, but they're such like an awkward like shape and size that my hands hate them, and because I'm trying not to like break the spine, it takes forever to read them and to read them comfortably. So I was so happy when I got out of the first 3 books, because everything else I have hardback, which is so much nicer just to hold. Definitely one of my 5-star reads, and just made October a really fun month. Now, after I got out of my Mercy Thompson spiral, or rather, as I was in the midst of it, I was reading my one and only pick from my TBR, and that was Dracula by Bram Stoker. I feel like Dracula is one of those books that everyone knows about but hasn't necessarily read, and I was one of those people. Like, I love vampires, but I had never read Dracula, and I decided that this was finally the month that I was going to read Dracula, because it's a classic, and it was the perfect thing I needed for spooky month. And if you see the size of this book, this is a huge book. So rather than sitting down and reading this story, I actually listened to an audiobook version on Audible, which had a full cast narration, which really made this a lot of fun because we got to hear the different characters speak, because this is an epistolary book. So we get journals and letters in which we are told this story. While reading those letters can be very fun and interesting, it also means the story is very slow going, because we're watching as the characters kind of piece this story together. Hearing it in audio form just made it a lot more interesting, because I could listen as I was driving to school, which is I have an hour commute, so it's perfect in the mornings just to kind of like relax and drive and listen to this slow discovery of the monster that is Dracula. I had a lot of fun with this book, more than I thought I was going to, because this is admittedly a very slow moving book, in that because we are learning bits and pieces about Dracula and kind of like what he's doing through letters and journals of various characters, it takes a while for the plot to get anywhere, which was really interesting to like listen unfold, because we know the story of Dracula. Like, everyone knows Dracula is a vampire. Like, it's the name of the game. This book is so iconic that you can't listen to it without knowing that. But even though we're like obviously screaming like he's a vampire, that's creepy, that's weird, watching characters who don't understand that is fascinating, because to them he's just a little odd. And if you remove your own sense of what's going on, it's kind of creepy how quickly everything devolves, because it's very slow building. The characters don't know that they're in trouble until they're already knee deep in it. And it's almost inescapable, because Dracula's reach is extending so far from Transylvania, where the book begins, all the way, I believe, to London, where Mina Harker is kind of residing with her friend. So it's this ever-reaching tale and this ever-reaching like dark presence throughout the book. And by the time we reach the climax and we're kind of having to face Dracula head on. We feel the tension as our characters are essentially racing against a clock. Will they, won't they get the monster? It was a lot of fun to listen to. I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much if I read it, only because I was really busy in October and I don't think I would have had the patience to sit down and read this because, like I said, it is a very chunky book. I believe it's over 500 pages. Yeah. So it's quite a long tale to read, but listening to it, I think, was an 18-hour audiobook, which is still a long time. I'm not saying it's a short story or a shorter time listening to it, but listening to it kind of gave it a more dramatic feel. And because I had like blocked it off into hour chunks during the days, it just made it a little more digestible. So, but I still had a lot of fun reading this story, and I'm very glad that I now can say that I've read Dracula. Now, another thing I read for this month is O is for Outlaw by Sue Grafton, which was the next book I needed to read in the Alphabet series, but I think the actual name of the series is the Kinsey Millhone series. I call it the Alphabet series because most people understand it. It's the alphabets. Anyways, as I mentioned in a community post, I actually had to like go on a trip in the middle of October. So this is usually the series I bring with me on the plane to read, just because they're quick and easy to digest and they're not that big. And so I did it. I kept tradition up because I was going to Ohio, and funny enough, I'm reading O. This series follows Kinsey, who is a private investigator, and we're following her as she's going through various cases. So in this book, we're following Kinsey as she gets a call from a stranger who buys storage units who have been abandoned. And in one of these units, he had found a box of like her childhood things, as well as just items she had lost over the years. And she was really curious of like how he came about this item. And it turns out that the storage locker that had been bought was actually that of her first husband, who she hasn't seen and heard from in years, which gets her curious. And so as Kinsey does a little bit of investigating, she finds out that her ex-husband has actually been put into a coma because he was shot in the back of the head, and no one knows what is going on. And even though Kinsey hasn't heard from this man in years, nor has she thought about him, she finds herself investigating what has happened to him and who could have possibly done it to him. Overall, I would say this was okay. It was really nice getting to see a glimpse into Kinsey's past, because she doesn't typically talk about her life and like what it was like growing up beyond the surface level stuff. So finally getting to meet her first husband, who's been this kind of like mysterious figure that she's mentioned a few times, was really interesting. And also getting to meet people who knew Kinsey from that time in her life. I wouldn't say it was the most riveting of the books, and in fact it was a little hard to get into, which I think is just kind of on par for these books. They are a bit of a slow start, but once they have you, they have you. And I definitely got caught in this book, but it also might have been half delirium because I was like moving between 3 time zones on like 2 hours of sleep. So caveat. But I still had a lot of fun reading this book. I ended up giving it 3 stars because it was just an okay read. I enjoyed myself, but I didn't find it amazing. It wasn't my favorite entry in this series by far, but it was really nice getting to see Kinsey's past and to get to know a little bit of who she was and who she may have fallen in love with. But even though I did not like her husband, I thought he was kind of trash. But whatever, she's moved past that. She is moved on with her life. But I am very interested in seeing how the story is going to progress and how much more of Kinsey's past we're going to learn in the upcoming books. So after reading this book, I am more than the halfway point, because Sue Grafton only actually made it to Y in the Alphabet series before she died, which is like the saddest thing. She had one more book before she completed the full alphabet. She had been writing these books since the 80s, so that's insane to me. And the fact that I'm so close to finishing the series is amazing. Okay, so the last 2 things I read for October is kind of funny because I put them on my November TBR. But I had recorded my November TBR on a few days before the end of the month. And so the day before Halloween, I sat down and read 2 graphic novels, which was Snapdragon by Leyh and then Pumpkinheads by Rowell. I put these on my November hopefuls in that I wanted to read them, but I wasn't going to force myself to read them. And then I ended up reading them for October. But I'm very glad I did, because Snapdragon in particular was my second 5-star for October. And oh my God, I've had this graphic novel on my radar for years. It was recommended to me by my friend Cindy, and she just thought I would really like it. And so I put it on my list, and I haven't been able to necessarily track it down when I'm out and about shopping for books, but I saw that they had it at my local library when I was there to pick up another book. And so I said, okay, fine, I'm going to grab grab it and read it finally so I can decide if I even want to purchase it. And oh my god, this was so good. So this is about our main character, Snap, or Snapdragon, who is kind of this like tomboy-esque girl who is kind of an outsider in comparison to the rest of her classmates. Well, one day her dog goes missing and she goes looking for it at the local witch's house, who has been known to eat animals and kind of terrorize the town. And so she braves the witch's house to get her dog back, only to find that the witch everyone's afraid of is actually this kind of weird and funky lady who collects roadkill and cleans and sells their bones online. And Snap becomes enamored with her and this kind of weird habit of animal anatomy. And so we're following Snap as she gets closer to Jax, our weird and local witch, and just kind of starts discovering more about herself, but also realizing that Jax is in fact a witch and that she is very much the magical creature the rumors made her out to be, but she's not eating children and animals, but rather she is help shepherding lost animal souls away, as well as maybe protecting her family. So this was a beautiful graphic novel, and it wasn't that long, but the art is just absolutely stunning. Like, we have these vivid colors and this very distinct art style. It just made it visually like appealing to look at, and I felt like it went with the story very well. But the thing I love most about this book is all the representation in it. So not only do we have a Black female protagonist, but we get a lot of depictions of Black family, which was just chef's kiss, because while yes, we are seeing a single mother household, we are also seeing a loving and accepting Black family, not only in just Snap's family, who comes from a very big family, but also in her best friend Lou's family. Lou, who is a transgendered girl, and we get to see Lou's transition from identifying as a boy to identifying more as a girl throughout this book. And one thing I really loved about that was, even though it's not the main focus, we see that Lou's family is immediately accepting, and there's no drama over forcing Lou to remain a boy, but really rather being accepting to everyone. And no one says shit about Lou's transition, which I think was just really nice to read, something just sweet and not traumatic, which often unfortunately follows that. You don't always have to have that trauma with these stories. It is nice to see it just represented in a happy way, and I felt like Snapdragon really did that well. And it was just so nice to see and to read something that had these like darker tones to it, but in itself wasn't dark. 5-star read, highly recommend this book. And then the very last thing I read in October was Pumpkinheads by Rowell. Now, this is like the peak fall graphic novel. Peak fall. Like, it's Pumpkinheads. It's about these two teenagers who work at like a pumpkin patch every year, and it is their last shift at the pumpkin patch before they go away to college. We're following our two main characters, Josie and Deja, who are on a mission to get Josie to talk to the girl he's been crushing on the entire time he has worked at this pumpkin patch, but has never talked to. And so Deja said, tonight's your night, we're going to do it. And so they ditched their assigned position and start hunting down this girl who is being like moved around between different stations. So they're trying to track her all night. And as they're doing so, they're kind of reminiscing their time at the pumpkin patch and everything they've kind of been through. We get this really cool like map of the pumpkin patch so we can follow along with their journey, which was a nice touch. But it was just really sweet seeing these two characters interact with each other, because it's clear that even though Josie is crushing on another girl, there's something special going on with this relationship with Deja. And Deja is this really loud and kind of funny protagonist who's unashamed of who she is and what she likes. And we're following her as she's not only trying to help Josie, but also on a mission to eat all the food at this pumpkin patch, which is such a mood, honestly, because there's so many good things. My mouth was watering reading these books. I wanted to eat everything that they were talking about. And watching as Deja is eating these foods was great, but also in how her snacks kept getting interrupted by either like a kid stealing them or like she like was bumped and had to lose them. So we're ever chasing the snacks as well as ever chasing this girl. And it was just such a great fun time. It was sweet. It was silly. I will say that it was broken broken up a bit weird. Like, it's told in chapters, but the chapters are very short, and I didn't see the need for those like short breaks because I felt like it interrupted the flow of the story. I think this is all one continuous chapter might have worked a little bit better rather than these like small vignette moments. That was the only thing that kind of like drew this back, as well as characters kind of felt like caricatures of themselves at times. Like there was not a lot of depth to these characters nor this story. It is a single night and a few hours where we're following these characters kind of like trapeze around, and it's more of a love tale about, I would say, pumpkin patches, and rather than any like in-depth relationship between these two. It's not bad. I end up giving this a 3-star rating because it was just a fun time. It wasn't anything deep, and it didn't have to be. I wasn't expecting this to be a very deep book. I was expecting it to be fun and very fall, and it achieved that job. So yeah, a solid 3-star, and I would definitely recommend this book if you just want something that's sweet and get you in that like fall vibe. Pumpkinheads. Quick and easy. It's not that long at all, and it reads really quickly, especially because of those chapter breaks. So you may be asking yourself, Emily, that wasn't 10 books. To which you're right, that was only 8 books. The other 2 books I read were actually for school, and that was Our Nig by Harriet E. Wilson, as well as Heroic Slave by Frederick. I count them in my yearly reading as well as in my TBR or in my wrap-ups because I did physically read them in the month, but they're not books I like chose to read necessarily. They're just what I had to read for school. So I'm not actually going to talk about them, but I would like to mention them because they relatively were really good classics because they are really enjoyable reads and works I had actually not read before this year, even though they're in my major field of study. With that rounds up the books I read for October. So I, again, had such a good reading month that I'm kind of surprised at it because September was such an awful reading month, but October was a lot of fun, and I'm hoping we carry that vibe over into November because I have a lot of fun reads and a nice reread plan, so it's just gonna be a good time, I think. And oh, I forgot, November has one of my most anticipated releases this year, so that is for sure going to be read. So I'm actually really excited for November, and I hope I have as good of a reading month that I did this month. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider leaving a thumbs up and a comment down below. Let me know, what was your favorite thing you read in October? Did you reread a series? Did you discover a new series or a new book that you just fell in love with? I want to hear it all. Give me more books to put on my TBR and hurt my wallet. That's it for me. If you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel out and lets me know you want to see more videos like this. I release a video every week, and it's been so much fun making content for you guys. But I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!